The United States has once again passed an aid bill for Ukraine, but this time they played a little trick. On July 11th, local time, the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee approved $500 million in security assistance to Ukraine. This made Zelensky overjoyed. He said Ukraine had received positive responses from the United States and its European allies. The military support channels have been fully restored, but the Americans played a new trick this time. They first sell the aid weapons to NATO, and then have NATO hand them over to Ukraine. According to Trump's words, the United States will ship Patriot missiles to NATO, and NATO will distribute them to Ukraine. NATO will pay the full cost of these weapons. So, where does NATO's money come from? CCTV correspondent Wei Dongshu made it clear. NATO's funding mainly comes from European countries. Countries like Germany and France in Western Europe must first draw up a weapons procurement list. Then American arms manufacturers produce according to the order. Simply put, European countries pay the money. American companies make the profits, Ukraine gets the weapons, and in the end, Russia gets hit. On the surface, it looks like the U.S. is offering selfless aid, but in reality, the wallets of U.S. arms dealers get fatter. The U.S. government's fiscal pressure is reduced, and they still earn a reputation for righteousness. This scheme is so loud you could hear the abacus clattering across the Atlantic. As early as the 10th, the day before, Trump had expressed this idea during an interview and said he might use presidential powers to approve sending more weapons to Ukraine. These weapons could be worth around $300 million and may include Patriot missiles and loyal rocket systems. After this whole process, the U.S. profits on both ends, earning money from arms sales and strengthening its control over NATO, while shifting the blame for the Russia-Ukraine conflict onto Europe. This arms resale for cash move is a perfect example of middlemen pocketing the difference. In response, the Russian side stated that this act is purely business. Let's first see how much the US's so-called generosity to Ukraine is actually worth. According to data from the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, as of April 2025, the total U.S. aid to Ukraine had exceeded $120 billion, of which $69.5 billion was military aid. But how much of this money actually ended up in Ukraine's hands? A report from the Center for Strategic and International Studies hit the sore spot. 90% of the funds never even left the U.S., and all went back to benefit U.S. military-industrial companies. Take this $500 million aid package as an example. Under Trump's maneuvering, it will most likely turn into orders for Raytheon Technologies, Lockheed Martin, and other companies. Now let's look at the profits of these arms giants. Raytheon Technologies' net profit for Q1 to 05 was $1.535 billion, while Lockheed Martin's net profit for the same period was $1.71 billion, showing year-on-year growth. Since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the stock prices of these major arms companies have been soaring. You could say this is no war. It's a money-printing machine for the U.S. military-industrial complex. While the U.S. rakes in profits, its European allies suffer. According to Trump's demands, NATO member states' military spending must account for 5% of their GDP. But what is the reality? German Defense Minister Pistorius bluntly stated that this would be equivalent to Germany putting 40% of its national budget into defense. It's simply unrealistic. In 2024, Germany's defense spending barely reached 2% of GDP. To raise the money, the German government even plans to amend its basic law to allow large-scale borrowing. Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez openly refused to increase defense spending, saying that 2% is already enough to fulfill their responsibility. Under Trump's approach, NATO's funds must still be used to buy American goods first. Just like with the Patriot missiles this time, Germany already had them in stock. But the US insisted that Germany pay for new ones, keeping the old ones for itself. This kind of forced spending leaves European countries with grievances they can't voice. If they don't buy, they offend the US. If they do buy, their own fiscal pressure skyrockets. Some European media complained that the US has turned NATO into its own exclusive weapons store, and they don't even have the right to bargain. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov's comment hit the mark. The US is just old wine in a new bottle, still essentially delivering weapons to Ukraine. More importantly, through this method, the US ties NATO to its war chariot, drawing European countries deeper into the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Interestingly, on the very same day military aid resumed, Ukraine's defense intelligence chief Budanov sent out an important signal. There's hope for a ceasefire before the end of the year. However, he emphasized that it would require the joint participation of Russia, Ukraine, and the US. Experts analyzing the situation noted that previously US President Trump wanted the Russia-Ukraine conflict to end quickly. But now that he's in the arms business, America's defense companies can keep running at full capacity. So the US's willingness to resolve the conflict may weaken. The situation on the battlefield confirms this. Russian forces have recently stepped up attacks on Ukraine's military-industrial facilities, while Ukrainian forces have struck Russian aircraft factories. Behind this tug-of-war are the constant orders flowing to U.S. arms dealers. As CCTV correspondent Wei Dongshu analyzed, if the U.S. truly treats the Russia-Ukraine conflict as a business, then the possibility of a ceasefire becomes even smaller. After all, the longer the war drags on, the more arms can be sold. War has turned into a lucrative business, and a ceasefire is naturally a distant prospect. From Afghanistan to Iraq, from Syria to Ukraine, America's arms business has never stopped. This time, by treating NATO like an ATM, it has put America's America First selfishness on full display. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. European countries cannot play the fool forever. French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné put it well. Europe needs another insurance policy outside of NATO. After all, even Brazil has begun openly resisting the US. When Europe starts to awaken, how much longer can American hegemony last? Finally, a word of old wisdom for the US: if you only think about taking advantage, you'll suffer a big loss sooner or later.